I'd like to call this meeting of the Bellingham Public Works Public Safety Committee to order. Joining me on the committee is Michael Lilliquist and Roxanne Murphy. We have 4 items before us today. First item is a proposed ordinance accepting donation of real property and improvements known as the Padden Lake Hill Stormwater Facility.
Thank you. Good morning. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. Back at your March 9th meeting, Public Works Department came to the committee requesting that we move forward with due diligence on 3 privately owned pieces of property, 2 of which were stormwater facilities. The third was former right-of-way that had been vacated. In all 3 scenarios, the property owners had approached the city requesting that the city take the facilities over, the property and the facilities within the property over. And the city has a process for that. It's under the donation of property, surplus property provisions in our Bellingham Municipal Code. When we came to you on March 9th, we were requesting authority to move forward with due diligence, doing environmental site assessment of the property to make sure that the property didn't have any hidden issues that would cause the city to not want to accept the property. So the first 3 items are similar in nature. This first one is a stormwater facility. As I mentioned to the committee last time around, the typical model is that stormwater facilities that serve residential areas are owned and maintained by the city. There are just a handful of privately owned and maintained stormwater facilities in the city that treat and detain stormwater runoff from residential areas, single-family residential areas. So it's certainly within our model. It's consistent with our model that these facilities would be owned and operated by the city. I think it's the best way to ensure that the facilities are properly maintained and we obtain the best water quality and detention of stormwater. So we did move forward with our site assessment. The site assessment showed that there were no issues with this piece of property. The city does recommend, or the staff recommends to council, that the city take these facilities over. The agenda bill does highlight some costs that will be incurred by the stormwater utility, both in the property transaction costs. We've already incurred some of those in the site assessment, and then an additional initial cleanup cost, after which these facilities will go into our list of publicly owned facilities that will be inspected and maintained on a routine basis. So with that, it is staff's recommendation that the city move forward with accepting this property and facility.
Okay. Committee, any comments? Yes, Roxanne.
Well, I'll just move that we pass the ordinance accepting the donation of real property and improvements known as Padden Lake Hills Stormwater Facility.
Okay. Michael?
Well, you know, I understand and I agree with the fact that stormwater facilities should be publicly owned and publicly maintained. These homeowners pay a stormwater fee. That's their share for stormwater projects citywide. But I'm having a problem with the, in this case, $15,000 initial cleanup costs. I'm wondering how many houses help pay for this facility initially, and what sort of, you know, we would be incurring that cost. I guess I don't want to incur that cost. I don't think it's quite fair. I'm thinking that the homeowners, however many there are, should pool together, pay those cleanup costs to us for the cleanup work, and then we'll inherit all the ongoing costs from then on. So the benefit of the homeowners is it's no longer their responsibility. My question is, how many houses are we talking about that share this facility and currently share its maintenance responsibilities?
Bill, do you have the answer to the number of lots? And this is a unique situation, I will say, where there's several facilities that feed into this facility, so they act in tandem, or there's actually maybe 3. Bill, can you expand on that?
Yeah, it looks like there's it's a 19 or 20 lot subdivision that this serves. This was the first stormwater facility in the city of Bellingham, and that's part of the reason why it wasn't taken over by us initially. In terms of the cleanup costs, those costs are not so much cleanup as some modifications that have to be done to the facility to make it compliant with new codes, new standards, and part of that is no fault of the property owners here. It's actually something that has occurred from upstream development. So I would concur that this is something that the stormwater utility should take on as an issue. So,
Mike? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Ted.
You know, I think it's a fair point that you raised, certainly. I think one thing to keep in mind is that these folks have been paying their monthly stormwater fee since the properties were built. They paid whatever nominal SDCs were at that time if the stormwater utility had them, and I'm not certain that they did. But they, in all ways, pay the same as folks that are developing for a facility that is that does go into public ownership right of way. So they have paid as though the city would have been maintaining this. At the same time, they've been paying their homeowner association dues, which, you know, is their private issue, but that's how they've been doing the maintenance that they have been doing. So we considered that as staff as to whether or not it was fair to the utility to take on the initial cleanup cost as well as ongoing costs. And we concluded that we did think that it was equitable and fair, and that the stormwater utility can take those costs on, and it is a reasonable cost given that the folks that live in that area have been paying their monthly stormwater fees the same as folks that don't have the responsibility of maintaining a stormwater facility.
Right, but those stormwater fees pay for a lot of things all around the city that are no particular homeowner's responsibility. The lake or the bay or a stream or a river.
Correct.
So it isn't just that each homeowner pays for only the infrastructure near them.
That's
I
correct.
guess my opinion is that for only around $750 per homeowner, the homeowners there could pony up and pay that cleanup cost, and then we would acquire it. So under those terms, I'd actually be supportive of acquiring this tract, because I do believe that publicly managed and owned stormwater facilities in our integrated system really will be better in the long run. But that $15,000 I don't think is fair to the ratepayers.
Got a quick question. You'd said part of this fee is for providing upgrades to meet current code. If it stays with the existing homeowner, like I'm assuming the homeowners association doing it, they don't have to upgrade because it stays within the previous rules. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. And the standard that is that was different at the time when this facility went in was that normally all of our detention facilities are designed for managing the 100-year flood. This one in particular was only to manage the 25-year flood, and then we have some upstream issues associated with this that that may prevent us from prevent this facility from even dealing with that storm. Yeah. And this was this was done by Jones Engineering. Pat Jones was the engineer for this. He died some years ago, yeah. So there's no way to go back on the engineer in terms of this.
Right. Yeah. So the way I'm seeing it is these fees are a majority going towards the improvements that we want to make for them that wouldn't be incurred if we leave it where it's at. So I have no problem with that. Yes. Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. We will recommend approval tonight.
Thank you.
Yep.
And so, as I mentioned, there's a couple more that are similar in nature. This second one is a donation of real property and improvements known as the 22nd Street Stormwater Facility. Similar in nature in that the council authorized staff to move forward with the site assessment. We've done that. Again, it did not show any issues that were of concern that would cause the city not to want to move forward with the surplusing of this property, at least in the city, or donation of this property, at least in staff's opinion. It does have similar issues in that there's some initial cleanup costs associated with this. Again, it's staff's recommendation that it is to the benefit of the city and that the costs that would be incurred would be reasonable and acceptable for the stormwater utility. So with that, it's staff's recommendation that council authorize the ordinance.
Okay. Comments? Michael?
Well, I have the same concerns and the same question. In this case, again, how many homeowners are currently responsible for maintaining that facility?
In this particular case, this was a development that occurred through a series of lot line adjustments, and the property for the stormwater facility was a separate tract, and through there was supposedly the ability to place another building on this tract B. It therefore had some valuation as far as the assessor was concerned. The development company that owned Lot B then simply did not pay their taxes. And when it was taken over by the assessor's office, it was auctioned off to an unknowing person in Canada that has legal ownership of it right now. The facility basically needs to be maintained in terms of vegetation. It's highly unlikely that it's going to be improved or maintained in its current ownership. We believe that in order to have this facility work competently, it's in the interest of the city to step in here.
Well, again, my question is who's currently responsible for this? It seems that this entity, JPNM 2014 LLC, this is a single entity which bought this property, a single entity which owns this property, and they simply find they can't develop it and they'd like to donate it to the city. Is that the case?
That is the case, and unfortunately, there is very little that we can do with someone that is outside of this country in terms of requiring them to do maintenance. They can simply also just forego the taxes. It will go again on the tax sale, and we will be here again looking at the same issue.
Well, again, I'm looking at $40,000 that I don't know why the public has to pay for. I agree with the fact that taking this over would be in the public's best interest and would be a good use of stormwater money. I just don't know why we're paying $40,000 cleanup costs in addition to the annual costs. I understand that's part of what we do as a city, but
And I would fully agree with you. The real responsible parties are the developers that originally put this development together, and they devised a way to get out from underneath the responsibility for this facility, and it's an unfortunate circumstance.
by the staff's logic, though, we'd be bailing out those originally responsible parties as well, because the logic is the same. It's better owned and operated as a public utility system.
Again, you're asking the right questions. I mean, these are the questions that staff has also struggled with. And in our analysis, as Bill mentioned, you have an owner that's out of the country. Our ability to make them, some way go in and clean up this facility, which has just been neglected. It hasn't been maintained. These costs that we've identified are largely due to the fact that the tract has trees that have grown up in it, that it's mostly vegetation control that would be done with our crews over time. We looked at what our options are to really go after somebody and require them to maintain this facility. Our analysis was we'll probably spend as much money in the long term through enforcement efforts and legal costs as we would just taking the facility over, which we believe is the right thing in the long run for the utility. So I don't disagree with your concerns over the utilities money. We thought the same thing. We certainly don't want to not be good stewards of the utilities money, but we believe in the long run this is the best path to getting to where we need to be.
I think this falls under what's even the most conservative definition of government, needing to do those things which will not be done without their help. If we don't do this, it's not going to happen, and the public is at a loss with it, and that's when government needs to step up, when it's in cleanup kind of things, when fortunately, that's what government does. If the public can, and it's within their to do it, they should. But in cases like this, it's not going to happen. And at least that's my understanding. This isn't going to happen, and we are concerned about stormwater runoff and the cleanup and that kind of thing. So, I think that's what, as government, we do. Roxanne?
And I move that we pass the ordinance accepting the donation of real property and improvements known as the 22nd Street Stormwater Facility.
Michael?
I have a follow-up question. So Terry raises a good point. There are some things that need to be done, and there's really no better entity than the public entity. But in this case, what are the costs of inaction? What public interest is being protected? If this does indeed go unmaintained, what are the consequences? You say it's being overgrown. On balance, how bad is that?
So if Mr. Lillquist, this is a severely overgrown. If you were to drive past this water quality detention facility, you would not know that it was a water quality facility. You cannot see it at all. So from a public environmental perspective, you've got no environmental controls of any note. You've got no water quality, no detention that's occurring on this particular track. It's getting worse over time. The trees are so overgrown that you would not be able to see in if somebody were to have a problem. You've got a potential of a vector attractant for some rodents that are in there. It's not safe for people getting access in there. Some trails in there. You can't see people inside that facility. So it's I wouldn't call it blight, but it's getting pretty close to that. So the public's interest is to maintain the property to serve its original purpose for stormwater detention and water quality, to keep the public safe if they want to be using that property to some extent. People are walking through there as a trail between the two streets, and just to take a property which is not of any benefit to the city or the citizens or the neighbors and put it to beneficial use. If we don't do this, it will not get done. It will continue to get worse, and it will fill up and will no longer function.
A thicket with a trail through it doesn't sound like a blight to me. But in terms of stormwater, is there any stormwater consequences to downhill residents? And if there are stormwater consequences to downhill residents, don't they have some remedy under tort for harm caused to them?
If I could interject here, they may have remedies, but it's more likely that when this would fail, it would fail and it would be running water down 22nd Street when that occurs. The one thing that I did not indicate here was, there is some potential for us to increase the size of this facility. If you look at the map there, the unused Larrabee Avenue right-of-way in that area could allow us to increase the size of this facility if we chose, and be able to provide either water quality or some amount of detention for 21st Street as well as part of this.
Okay.
So there's some value to the city if that were the case.
Okay. So we have a motion before us. All those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion passes 2-1, and we will recommend approval tonight. Next item is an ordinance accepting donation of real property improvement known as the, real property located south of and adjacent to Birch Street.
Thank you. Again, the last of these similar issues, although this one, again, is a little bit different in that this is right-of-way. As you can see on the map there, it's the end of the Birch Street improvements. If you're familiar with the Galbraith, this is the Ridge Trail entrance to Galbraith Mountain. Very popular. We looked at this for several benefits, including future transportation connection and utilities, but as we discussed last time around, certainly some value in terms of future parks needs, access to Galbraith, potential parking. I did have a conversation with the Parks Department. Those conversations have not happened in a large part with the neighborhood, but certainly there's some value in having the right-of-way. Again, we moved forward with the site assessment. There were no issues found with the environmental phase 1, and therefore staff is recommending that council approve the ordinance accepting the donation of the former Birch Street right-of-way.
Okay. Michael?
I move that we recommend approval of the ordinance to purchase this property.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we have a motion before us. All those in favor, answer aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We will recommend approval tonight. So our last item before us is the LED street lighting retrofit project.
Thank you. This is an exciting project and one that council has been briefed on in a small way during the budget process. It was a project that was identified during the 15-16 budget process, but we'd like to provide some additional detail on the project, the benefits of the project, financing of the projects, and how it meets the city's goals. Clark Williams here will be giving a brief PowerPoint, and while he's setting it up, I would like to say that this is an issue that certainly meets a lot of the city's goals in terms of energy efficiencies, public safety, things of that nature. And city staff have been following the LED street lighting issue for quite a few years. And there have been utilities that have moved forward in the past, but we've really been waiting for the right time to do a major retrofit of our street lights and really looking at a couple things to come into play. And one is getting the life expectancy of the street lights to a point where you really can get some adequate payback, reducing our maintenance costs, and reliability of the street lights, making sure that they do work correctly, that they provide the benefit that they're intended to, and meet all of our goals. So with that, Clark's going to go through a brief PowerPoint here, and we'll certainly answer any questions you have.
Good morning, Council. Again, I'm Clark Williams with the Public Works Department. I'm the Superintendent of Transportation for Operations. And what we're here today to propose to the City Council is a retrofit project for all city-owned street lighting. We've got 3,615 street lights that the city owns that we're proposing to retrofit to light-emitting diode technology, or LED. By doing this, we can expect to save approximately $180,000 a year in utility savings. We've got some soft costs in there of approximately $43,000 a year, which saves our crews from relamping our existing streetlights. We relamp about 25% of our streetlights a year, so we're on a 4-year cycle. And a side benefit is we can save nearly 2 million pounds of CO2 and greenhouse gas emission reductions by going to an LED streetlight. This map's a little bit hard to interpret, but all the black dots are city-owned streetlights. The red dots are PSE owned and maintained, basically residential lights. Most of the city's street lights are on arterial streets. If you notice, the figure up there says 3,480. Not to get into the finite details, but I told you 3,615 lights. That's the pole location. So some of our poles have multiple lights on them. Just don't want you to get confused on the numbers. So how do we propose that we go about retrofitting 3,600 lights? We're proposing to use an energy performance contracting process. This is a process that's initiated through the state of Washington, through their Department of Enterprise Services. What this allows is for local municipalities such as ourselves to contract with the state to hire an energy service company, which in the industry is termed an ESCO. The goal of hiring these ESCOs is to determine if through energy savings we can guarantee the payback of our financial investment to do a project such as this. So council might recall back in 2009, we had about a $6 million improvement project that we did through this process through a company called JCI. That was the ESCO at the time. We did look at LED lighting at the time in 2009, but we couldn't guarantee the payback for the investment. So what's changed since 2009? Now in 2015, the fixture cost for LEDs is dramatically reduced. We used to have to pay almost $500 per fixture. It's down to about $150 per fixture. The warranty on LED lights is guaranteed for 10 years, but the industry suspects that they'll burn for 100,000 hours, which is almost equivalent to a 20 to 22-year lifespan.
Clark, would we replace them on a 20-year schedule, or
Correct.
we would really go to 20-year?
Yes. And actually, in 20 years, for the replacement schedule, I'm going to assume that technology is going to completely change in the next 20 years, so I can't even comprehend what we might replace them with. But the industry thinks 20 to 22 years is the lifespan of the fixtures. The new LED lights have superior technology for cutoff, so we can control the light in a downward pattern so that we reduce our glow. And the LEDs are, like I said, between a 40 and 80% energy savings based on our high-pressure sodium lights that you see on the street today. So our latest proposal before council today is through an ESCO called McKinstry. Again, we selected them through the state's DES program. It's about a $4 million project in total. So what we're proposing is that through a $3.5 million energy savings loan through the state's local program financing. It's a pretty low interest rate. It's about 2.6% right now. It's very similar to what we recently financed, the replacement of the 6 ambulances that we did for fire. We were successful in receiving a $500,000 grant from the Department of Commerce, and we expect there's about a $400,000 to $450,000 rebate through Puget Sound Energy. So a little bit of the side benefits aside from the reduced energy consumption. I already mentioned it's almost 2 million pounds worth of CO2 that we would reduce in our carbon footprint. And I just put together some equivalents, what that might be equal to. So it's equal to removing 158 vehicles from our roadways, or not energizing 22,000 75-watt light bulbs, or taking 79 average homes off the power grid, 2,200 acres of trees that could be planted, and again, 800,000 pounds of coal that we're not burning. So I went out the other night. This is 25th Street, right off Bill McDonald Parkway. We recently did a roadway improvement project. I went out and snapped some photos. The top left photo is just looking down 25th Street from Bill McDonald Parkway. This is as you approach the intersection of Douglas. And what's interesting to note, you can see this is a new LED fixture right here. On the left side of the street is our old high-pressure sodium lamps that are on PSE poles. If you get down to the intersection and you look to, let's say, the east, you can look down towards 24th Street. You can see the crosswalk clear down at the next intersection with just this one LED street light. If you turn around and look the other way down Douglas, look at the dramatic light cutoff, and you can see all the street lighting right here. These are high-pressure sodium lights that are in existence today, but they really don't do much for lighting the street. Here's another quick example on Commercial Street in front of the theater. We went out and we retrofitted these 2 lights right here with LED fixtures just as a kind of a test case. You can see all the existing lights in the background, but if you look at the street itself, you'll see the kind of the warm light glow below these 2 fixtures. So if anybody wants to run out at night and take a look at these, it's a good example of what you might expect. So for the next steps, like I mentioned, we already completed the energy grade audit with McKinstry. They have proven that we can guarantee the payback of the debt service to finance this project. We're looking for direction from the City Council at this point to proceed forwards. If we get your approval, we will route the contract to the Department of Energy Services with the state, and I would expect Brian Henshaw to come back to the City Council in May with a funding package. Again, he's already indicated that he would like to use the low-interest local program financing through the state. Once the funding is in place, McKinstry, our ESCO, can complete the design, and we'll start construction in June and should be finished by November of this year.
Thank you, Clark. Any questions?
Michael?
In general, I'm really excited. It's a great idea. Moving to modern technology saves energy, saves money, saves maintenance, all great things. I guess I'm worried about throwing out currently working lamp heads. We replace a quarter of them every year, so really about half of them probably have some useful lifespan in them. I guess I'm worried about, you know, the embodied carbon and the waste that's you know, represented by throwing away half of our lamp heads that probably have, you know, a good 2 years of life left in them. That's, you know, 1,500 lamp heads. That's an appreciable cost that we've already incurred. Is there logic? Would it make some sense, instead of doing this whole project by the end of the year, maybe doing it over, you know, a 1 year period, do half of them now and half of them next year? I'm trying not to waste the working lamp heads that we currently have. I think that'd be, you know, if you did the full accounting on this procedure, you'd have to put that in the minus column as opposed to the plus column.
Yeah, I'll start with it, and then maybe Clark can speak to it a little bit more. This particular process, the ESCO process, one of the things you have to do is show that they're guaranteeing the energy savings, which is one of the values of going through this process, is that we get to select a pre-approved company that's going to go through this energy grade audit where they look at your scope of work and identify at what point do the savings pay for your financing costs. And in this case, looking at all of the city's streetlights, we get enough energy savings and reduced maintenance cost over that period of time that it does just pay for the financing of it. So a smaller project, and we've looked at how we could potentially phase this project in, both from the issues that you've raised, but also just from our ability to finance it, and should we break the project up into a multiple year project. And with the process we're in right now with DES, with the energy grant, or the grant we got from the Department of Commerce, we really do need to do all 4,000 lights, or nearly 4,000 lights, to make the project work. So the current process that we're in, we could not phase it. Perhaps Clark could speak to the lights themselves and the issues that you brought up.
No, you're correct. The existing lamps will be recycled. And the reason for doing the entire project now in 2015 is because of the Department of Commerce grant for the $500,000. Our application was scored on the premise that we were going to replace all 3,615 lights. If we don't do that, we do not get the $500,000 from Commerce.
Huh, well, okay. You say the current lamp heads will be recycled. There's recycled and there's recycled. Do we know how much of the material is recoverable in those things? I really just don't like the idea of throwing, you know, I'm trying to convert over to LED lights in my house. I've still got some old fluorescents because certain fixtures, you know, it's harder to get the dimmable bulbs, and I've also got some old LED bulbs. I'm changing them over as, you know, time permits. I don't want to throw away something that's perfectly good. How recyclable are these old lamp heads?
I don't have that information off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to report back to council.
Okay. Roxanne?
Well, I'm excited about this from an environmental perspective, but I'm also really excited about it from a public safety perspective, because keeping the streets lit is such a better way to keep our streets safe. And there's such a major problem that public works departments have with replacing old street lights. And the second it gets dark, the second it gets less safe. So I am happy to pass a motion to ask the Public Works Department to proceed with the LED street lighting retrofit project.
Okay. Michael?
I will be supporting this. I agree it has, as I said before, enormous environmental, energy, and operational savings. I would like to know that we can recycle those old lamp heads. But I actually worry about a little bit too much light. You said these are easier to focus downward. I mean, light pollution is a problem. It interferes with wildlife, it interferes with sleep. But these things are focused. We want to light up the streets. We want them to be nice and bright.
Actually, if you look at the closing slide right here, this is a real image. This is not in our state. This is in Kansas. But this is the difference between a high-pressure sodium street lighting system and LED. And again, they are 100% directional cutoff, so we can control the angle of the light.
That's good. And also, you called the lighting, doing that little test project downtown nice and warm. Actually looked kind of cool as far as I'm concerned, and light is rated by degrees of, radiant heat, the energy. I always try to get the ones with the warmer bulbs,
No, you're-
2700 Kelvin or whatever it is.
You're right. The lighting that's proposed for our streets is in the approximate range of 4,000 degree Kelvin. It does go up to 5,000 and 6,000 degrees, but that is the more bright white.
That sounds cooler, bluer light then.
Correct. It's
Yeah.
more blue, yes.
Because 2700, 3000 is like indoor lighting.
And
There is-
we're shooting for 4,000.
There is another issue, not to get too much into the technical detail, but we will have the ability with this project to control the lights. In essence, we can dim the lights at certain times of day, which will have a couple benefits. One, we can reduce some of the light if we don't need it all, but also save additional energy by not burning at the full light during the times when there are not as many people on the street, but yet still creating a safe environment for folks. So not only do they have the energy efficiency, they're also they have better technology, more technology. We'll be able to monitor from Pacific Street whether we have outages. Right now, we can't do that. So there's some other operational benefits, including the ability to control the lights during certain times of the day. But Councilmember Murphy did raise a really good point, and one we didn't highlight. The police department is very supportive of this effort. It really does increase safety throughout the entire network downtown, but all of our arterial streets. So.
Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Aye. We will recommend approval tonight. I think that ends the committee. Thank you. This committee is adjourned.